welcome to my channel. My name is Tope Emmanuel. I'm a lead DevOps, software engineer, and trainer. Um, um, Today, I will be doing a tutorial on introduction to Visual Studio. I felt to do this to help anyone that might want to be that may want to get into software development, most especially in the .NET platform. I'm going to do a series of tutorials on the various IDEs that are available, ones widely used ones. Um, if you feel that you do need any one-on-one training or more specialized training, please do not hesitate to contact us. The name is Train for It Limited, the which is a subsidiary of cyrostop.co.uk, and the telephone number is +44 0203 637 9211. Or you can email us at admin@cyrostop.co.uk. I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel, to give us a thumbs up, and to sign up for notification. If you do believe that you could pick up things as we train you, as we do the tutorial, please do subscribe, and then I'm sure you will be glad you did. So let's get into it.
Right. We're going to the Visual Studio download page, and when you get to the page, you essentially have three options, and the three options depend on what machine you're using. So if you're on Windows machine, you would go for option one, which would then give you further options. And you could also download Visual Studio Code. Now, Visual Studio Code is slightly different from, is actually quite different from Visual Studio main. Visual Studio Code, it's an IDE that you could use for many other programming languages, not just restricted to the .NET platform. I'm gonna do another session on Visual Studio Code as opposed to Visual Studio, and I might also do a session on comparing the two. The last one, which you might have guessed what it means, is when if you're on Mac. I am using Mac. You would click this. So essentially, if you're using if you're using Windows, you use this. You could download Visual Studio Code. You can also develop .NET in Visual Studio Code, but we're not gonna go there today, like I said. And then the last one, you could, if you're on Mac, you click on this one. So I'm using Mac. I've clicked this. So it should start in a minute. So I've double clicked to start the installation process, which is starting now. And it's quite it's pretty straightforward. The installation is It's similar to every other installation on Mac. So I'm just gonna click continue here, and so it's gonna ask me uh, the the modules that I'm gonna need for for my day-to-day work. If I was using the professional version, it probably won't ask me these, but it's asking me, what are the modules I'm gonna need. Obviously, I've already downloaded Visual Studio for Mac. It's asking me if I want to use .NET Core as well. I'm gonna when we get into .NET, I'm gonna go into the details about the difference between .NET Core and .NET Main or um, um, the old .NET. Um, so I'm just gonna look at the options it's given me. It's selected Visual Studio already as downloaded. It's selected .NET Core as well. If I wanted to develop on mobile phones, Android for instance, I'm gonna select all of these. If I also want to develop Xamarin is also used on mobile phone. I will select these as well, or Mac OS or Mac. So I've selected everything. I probably don't need everything, and I'm gonna click install. Uh, so it's gonna take a little time to install. Whilst it install, I'm gonna grab a cup of tea and wait. This is what we do as developers. Um, whilst it's installing, one of the things that we that will test you, which is I think I'm actually gonna create a video for this actually. I was just gonna get into the temperament of a software developer, and I'm gonna actually do a video that will compare the temperament that you need as a software developer, as a coder, as opposed to that which you need for if you're gonna be a software tester, for instance, or if you're gonna be, say, a DevOps um, or project manager. I have experience in virtually all of these disciplines by virtue of the number of years I've spent in the industry. So I'm just gonna put my password again. So it's finished. It's finished installation. There is a suggestion that I update my Mac, but I'm just gonna ignore that and I'm gonna click done. And because I've asked it to start Visual Studio after it's finished, so Visual Studio was started automatically on my machine. So uh, this is Visual Studio starting. Um, so it's given me the option to sign in with Microsoft. Uh, I can sign in if I can remember my um, sign in detail. So I've signed in, and it's just gonna ask me which keyboard shortcut I want. Because I'm on Apple Mac, I'm just gonna select Apple uh, Visual Studio for Apple Mac. I could have selected the other one, but there's no point in selecting Visual Studio for Windows when I'm on Apple. But if you're on Windows, please do select Windows. So I'm just gonna do continue. And so this is when you just opened up Visual Studio. This is the screen that you get. So this screen is offering you two things. It's asking you if you've got a project that you need to open. So a project, as you may know, is a unit um, of work. It's a combination of all the things that you need to run an application. So you create a project where you need to create an application, and you would have several projects in a company if you when you do start working for an organization. But yeah, a project is just all the things that you need to run a single application. When we get there, I will speak more on that. So I'm gonna select new project just so that we can start from the scratch, and then it brings me to uh, the next page. And this next page is asking me, okay, what kind of project do you want to create? And it's giving me different kinds of project that I may want to create. And it's also asking me what language do you need to write this project in. For instance, I could have selected C sharp or F sharp. But yeah, but we're gonna select C sharp anyway. And then the kind of application we want to create, we could have created web application, we could have created an API application, any kind of application that we want to. Um, when we go into actually learning C sharp, I'm gonna create a web application so I can take people through this. I'm actually going to take people through series of applications that we can create, but I'm going to create a console application. A console application is just the kind of application that runs on your essentially the command line, and then it's asking me what name would I give my project. I'm just gonna give it Visual Studio Training, and so it's asking me to give it the project a name, and also asking me for a solution name. I'm gonna differentiate between the two. When I started, I did say that in an organization you would have a solution. A solution is a combination of different projects. Say, for instance, you're working for a a consultancy. A consultancy could have different projects, maybe from different clients. They might have a client that is a bank, and they could also have a client that is a store, let's say a grocery store. So they would have a project for the bank, and they will have a project the the bank and for the store, and they will put these two projects or whatever, and I mean however many projects they've got inside what you call a solution. So I could have given this solution a name. So I'm gonna change the name so that I can create a solution here, and I will call it training solution. I'm gonna call it .NET training solution. Then the next thing is it's gonna ask me where are you gonna store your um, solution. Um, Now, usually, many people would have a they will create a directory like this where they have, so they in the directory they'll call it development, and that's where I do a lot of my coding. So I'm gonna ask it to actually create it inside coding. It's also asking me if I wanted to create a project directory within the solution directory. I'm gonna say yes to do that. It's asking me which version control I wanted to use. I'm gonna select Git because Git is quite it's quite widespread. In the olden days, there were other version controls that we use. I will go over version controls as well in one of the videos. I have selected this, and it's giving me a preview of what it's gonna create, and then I'm gonna click create. And here you go. Um, I've got my uh, I've got my uh, first um, project on Visual Studio. I'm just gonna describe what you have here on the Visual Studio screen for this training. So you have, if you're on for Windows, it will be slightly different, but you have Visual Studio here, and you can make changes. If you click on Visual Studio preferences, you can make changes to all the things that you might want to change on Visual Studio, like how you want it to look. For instance, I could change. Some people prefer dark color. Um, I prefer the light one. I prefer this color of Visual Studio. Author information. It's put my name Tope Emmanuel. You might want to put, if you're working for a company, for instance, you might want to put the company's name. Key bindings, and you know your key bindings. Say for instance, code navigation, shortcuts that we would use throughout the application. You might want to change this to something else you know or you can remember. Um, but shortcuts are quite important when you're doing development. So you would have the opportunity to make these changes here, and the fonts that you use, you could change those as well. The tasks, sometimes when you need to do things like, for instance, you're writing code and you want to come back to it later, you would use tasks like to do, and so that when you build your application, you would I'm going to go back to what building is, and so many other things that you could change. It's quite important, things like text editor. You could find out, what happens, how you want your text editors to look like, markers and rulers, color theme, um, again, your IntelliSense. IntelliSense is it, it it's IntelliSense is quite important when you're using Visual Studio. It's one of the things that has made Visual Studio one of the best tools around. IntelliSense is what kind of suggests what you wanted to do. It's kind of a guide. It kind of sat nav when you're doing programming. And when I started doing programming, it's one of the things that really helped me. So you're trying to, when you just started writing program, you probably do not remember all the syntax and all the all those a lot of things essentially. So IntelliSense is gonna help you. We are gonna use IntelliSense, color themes, the language bundles that you want. You might want to add some other language bundles, XML schema, version control that you might want to do, and all of that. I'll suggest that you explore that. I'm just gonna cancel out of that. Then that is when you're doing your preferences, extensions. Again, you could do add extensions. So we've installed some things. When I downloaded this, for instance, version control and all of that, you could go into the gallery and install more. So you might want to install in the gallery other things that you may need as you continue um, using Visual Studio. You'll find out that you need some many other things that you might not have installed um, in the beginning. So you might go here and install them. It's not the only place that you can install from, but you do well to look into other things. Um, yeah. Um, your account too, because I signed in. Uh, my account is linked to my Visual Studio um, already, to my Microsoft account. Visual Studio is linked to my Microsoft. Go into file. File is essentially where you can create a new project, new file, new solution. The way we create a solution before, if you just open it, then you can create a solution through file as well. Uh, you can edit, use the edit view, you can view, you can search. If you wanted to search for things in the throughout the IDE, you can use this to search. Um, you can also go to a file to search for stuff. For instance, if I click on go to and I type in, if I wanted to use file, I click on go to file and then I type the name of the file. We've got only one file here, so there's no pricing guessing that there's only one file. But assuming we have many files, um, in a typical development environment, you will have loads of file in here. So if you wanted to, I could have added a new file. So if I wanted to add a new file, I'll go to my project. Remember when we started? So I named the solution .NET training solution. and I said I could have many projects under a solution. So, but we're working on one solution here, and inside the solution, we got one file. Um, I could have right click in Mac. You know how to right click, and then I could have added a new file, and this file could be again, I get it, it's just gonna be an empty class, and I give it a name, another file, and I add it. So if I wanted to search, I can do another file. I can find a file there. So that's one purpose of this, and then you could use the shortcut as well. If you had typed in, if you go to Command P, Command and P at the same time, it will open the file. If you wanted to also go to a class or a class, we will go on to all those things when we start learning about C sharp. You could also go to a type, which is what a class is, a type. It's a type in .NET, or you could go to a line in a file as well. So a very good function in Visual Studio is the search function. It helps you to work with searching around the application. Before I go further, I will point you at here, which I have made references to. So this is where you have the files, the code that you are building. It's actually here. So you would actually use this place to, this is where all your codes are essentially. And I have added, to the solution, to the project before I added file to the. So this is where you would have all the code you need to build, and that takes me to project. So the project is another tab that you can use to essentially when you're working with a project, so you can add references. So references in .NET terms are code that are already built um, by someone else, for instance, and or by the dot say the creators of .NET or C Sharp by themselves, but you wanted to use it. They are essentially, for instance, people access databases every time, and if you need to access database, you probably won't write everything from the scratch. You would want to add reference to something that would help you to access the database. So you will make reference to that code. Adding reference to that code, you will click on project add reference, and then you will look for a package or a project or a .NET assembly that maybe it's pre-installed. There is none here, so there's nothing to add here. But as we go along, I will start doing practicals. I will show you how to add references. Um, Again, you could also add NuGet package. NuGet packages again are references that you need when you're building your code in .NET Core. So these are there's a slight difference between when you're building .NET Core and when you're building .NET main. I've called it .NET main for want of can't remember the actual name. There's a big difference between .NET Core and .NET Framework. So in time past, people will build with .NET framework, but .NET framework only works on Windows, only work on the .NET environment, on the Microsoft environment. But as last time had gone by, people want to build application on Linux machine, on Mac. So it wasn't Microsoft realized, like all of the um, entities that are drivers in the programming world, that they cannot restrict the program or the language to just um, Windows. So they created the .NET Core. So the .NET Core can run on um, it can run on Windows. It can also run on Mac and Linux. It can run everywhere essentially. So that's the difference between .NET Core and .NET Framework. So you would either build it on. So you cannot. So as I am now, I cannot have .NET Framework on my Mac because it cannot even run on Mac at all. So if I wanted to build with .NET Framework, I would have to use Windows. So just a pointer. So if I go back here, um, then NuGet Packages. NuGet is a packager that you use to make references to all those um, pre-built programs that I've described before. So I said that if you wanted to build a program that accesses the database, for instance, or works with, say, XML, you want something that is a kind of like a primer. It's a kind of something that will aid what you're doing instead of writing it from the scratch. So that's what NuGet packages are. They are pre-built code which you can get, and then you can click on manage NuGet packages here, and you'll see loads of packages that are already built for you. For instance, if you wanted to access AWS, you would select this and add this package, and then it will help you to access AWS. If you wanted to build MVC, and if you wanted to do a lot of things, you would access, there are thousands of packages that you could use on .NET. So this is how to add packages to your um, .NET environment. So like I said before, if you wanted to work with text, manipulating text, for instance, or JSON, you would use this. We're not going to use this at the moment. I'm going to close it. Um, So again, this active configuration tells you which configuration you're using. Is it debug or is it release configuration? There's also a difference between debug and release. Again, the difference is usually that when you're in the debugging environment, when you're in the development environment, when the code is not yet ready for release, it tends to be bloated. It tends to have a lot of stuff that you are not going to use in the production environment. For instance, it would have things developers have put there and all of that. Those are things that you cannot put in the released version. Also, the released version tends to be squeezed and in such a way that it will be optimal when um, when it is done. There are other things I may not be able to go through in the course of the short video, but very importantly, there is the build tab. The build and the run tab. The build tab is the tab that you use to build the application. What do we mean by build the application? When you are building an application, you are confirming, you are putting everything together to confirm that it would run. So if it will run when you build it, Visual Studio will tell you that it builds. So there are three things: you can clean, you can build, and you can rebuild. So in Visual Studio, building a solution means just to compile it. Again, we're gonna go into what compiling a code means and all of that. We'll do a session on that. So let's just believe now that when you say you compile, you make the code into a state that can be run, or that could be understood by the computer. So that's what compiling is. So when you build an application, you essentially compile the application. So to build an application, you will click on builder, and you will get a notification here to tell you if it worked or not. So if I were to say make the application fail, and I type in H here, and I type build the application, it didn't compile, and Visual Studio is telling me straight away that the build did not compile because I've got one error. If I click on it, and I could see the error, the um, the display here, I could click on this and it will show me, it will take me precisely to where the error is. So essentially, when you build an application, you essentially compiling it. When you compile, Visual Studio will know that the application could compile and essentially go into the form that is understood by the machine. So if I build again, I've removed the bug that I introduced. It should compile. Yes, it's told me it's successful. There is also the clean solution. What a clean all does is it removes all the artifacts. It removes all the things that could make the code fail. Essentially, maybe all the artifacts that might have been introduced. That's what clean all does. Rebuild all, what it does is it cleans all first and then it builds. That what rebuild all does. Again, you can be specific and just build a particular project. In this case, I could target this if I've got other projects on this in this solution. So that's built. Running is to actually run the application. That's what it is. Again, I can just click on run. If I click on run, it will actually run the application. But because this application is an hello world application, if we go to the program, it's just telling, it's a basic application that is writing something on the console. So the console is essentially that terminal. That's your console, and it essentially Visual Studio is writing something into it's telling you're telling the code to write something to the console. So if we're talking about input output, so um, that is uh, that is running the application. So when you run the application, um, again, it's come back. Sometimes if it doesn't come back, you will have to click on stop. But that's if it hasn't returned. Um, you could also run with custom configuration. Um, Running with custom configuration just means that, for instance, if you wanted to run it on with the release configuration as opposed to the debug or um, programming environment configuration, you could run it like that. Now, the next one is start debugging. So start debugging means that you wanted to trace the application. So I'm gonna go through a session on debugging an application. But debugging, very simply, if I put what you call a breakpoint, a breakpoint is where you're telling the IDE that whenever it gets to this point, so when I've clicked here, I've put a breakpoint. A breakpoint is something that tells the application when you reach this point, stop. And if I run the application if I start debugging now, when it gets here, it stops. The application had actually hit that breakpoint. So essentially, you use breakpoints to um, to find out what is happening. Let's assume you are writing a program and it is failing at a particular point. You kind of like guess that okay, it's failing on from around line 7, so or line 8. So you put a breakpoint maybe on line 7, or let's say you kind of suspect that this application is failing on line 9. You put a breakpoint on line 8 so that you could go into the application and find out why it is failing. So because this is a basic entry level training, I'm not going to go too deep into that. I will do a separate video highlighting what I highlighting debugging. So, but that's what debugging is. So you can see now that it it tells me uh, it stops here, so I can go into this application, find out what is happening. Um, Again, there are other things that you could run. We can do with this tab. There is step into, step over, step out. Again, that's when you're debugging. Step into means that if there are other things, other internal things on a line, go deep into that. Step over means that go to the next line, and step out, or you can add a watch. A watch is saying that if something happens, um, you want the IDE to tell you about it. So, for instance, I could stop here and I could add a watch, and then I could say if I have a variable. Let's assume I create a variable. So I've created a variable called x. Again, uh, a lot of people will swear that you should never call a variable x, but this is just an entry level course, so I will just call it x by the way. So I want to add a variable. I want to add a watch, so I'll highlight it and I click on right, add a watch. So you've got your unit tests tab as well. This is one area that a lot of, if you're gonna be a professional software developer, you're gonna get used to writing unit tests. We're gonna go into unit tests later on as we carry on with this. I hope I've covered everything. I'm just gonna look through. Yeah. So I will advise you to play around with. Um, you know, um, I always say to people when I train that I can introduce you to development, but by and large, you also need to spend a lot of time learning your craft. Thank you for listening to this. Please do let me know. Write a comment below. Let me know uh, your feedback on this. Thank you. Bye.